Welcome back to the 2023 CanQuest. Check out part 1 on the short films if you haven't already, and the rest of the series when those go up. My full reviews once again are linked in the description, but for now, let's jump right back into the special screenings and out-of-competition titles. And full disclosure, no, I didn't see Killers of the Flower Moon. I would have done anything to get into that one, but there was only one screening during the entire festival, and as much as I was willing to do, standing in line from 1 AM the night before and losing out on an entire day of moviegoing wasn't on the list. So, let's check in on what I actually did get to see. We may as well start with the opening film of the festival, Jeanne from Maïwenn. There was obviously a lot of talk about this one going into the festival because it was Johnny Depp's supposed comeback movie, and on that front, I won't say he was awful in the film. His delivery does feel sort of stilted, as if he's being fed all his French lines phonetically before each take, but he does have this gravitational presence fit for someone playing the King of France, and the role is surprisingly not devoid of humor and humanity. As for the rest of the film, Maïwenn just feels like she's coloring inside the lines of a period piece in the same way that every other boring costume drama does. It's shot decently, and the costumes and set design are obviously exquisite, but for all the clear intention of giving life to an underappreciated historical figure, Jeanne is sadly really sterile as a film. It never strays from the beaten path, and by the time this character's life starts intersecting with the story of Marie Antoinette, it really reminds you that there are far more interesting costume dramas out there taking big swings with the form to breathe new life into these stuffy narratives. Jeanne just doesn't have any of that, and as a result the film just feels like a vanity project from Maïwenn to cast herself as an alluring but misunderstood tragic figure. There really isn't all that much worth discussing here, and with this being the opening film of the festival, it just makes it feel like less of a grand opening statement and more like the festival wanting to chuck this one out of the way as soon as possible. 4 or 4.5 out of 10 for Jeanne, I guess. Cobweb is the latest film from Kim Jee-woon, who's made a name for himself as one of South Korea's premier filmmakers who just hasn't reached the same level of his contemporaries like Park Chan-wook or Bong Joon-ho. Kim has his peak moments for sure, but his projects tend to feel far more typically blockbuster-oriented than the truly wacky shit that make his cohorts more famous overseas. Cobweb is a comedy about a director named, what else, Director Kim, going through hell trying to rework and reshoot the ending of his most famous film. As you can expect, it's a very chaotic experience, and much of the humor from this film derives mainly from how the actors deliver their lines rather than the lines themselves. Even if you don't speak Korean, there's just so much blind enthusiasm and insane energy on screen at all times that Cobweb manages to keep up a pretty decent pace of laughs per minute. Kang-ho is in the lead role, which already tells you all you need to know. He's on point, he's magnetic, and he just commands the screen in a way that really sells how these other characters would follow the lead of a man who's clearly in over his head. The jokes do come in consistently, but after a while, Cobweb just goes on for so long that it definitely begins to overstay its welcome. It never reaches Judd Apatow levels of exhaustion with its comedy, but man, could this movie have really benefited from a good half hour being shaved off. In any case, Cobweb is still a whole lot of fun that I'll be looking forward to checking out once more with a bunch of friends when it comes out in the future. For now, I'll settle with a good 7.5 out of 10 rating. Alright, let's talk about Kubi because I really don't know where to go with this one. Right off the bat, this is definitely the worst film I saw in Cannes, which is a take I'm surprisingly alone in having. I've never seen a Takeshi Kitano film, but this definitely turned me off the idea of ever wanting to do so, if I hadn't already heard such great things about Hanabi. Something about Kubi just got under my skin and pissed me off with how convinced it was of its own epic storytelling in spite of how cheap it looked and how bland yet confusing its narrative was. Everyone wants the same thing in this movie, and they all go about it in the exact same way, so it's really hard to give a shit about anyone or even tell them apart most of the time. The outfits look like plastic Halloween costumes, the set design is minimal but not stylistically minimalist, the lighting is flat as hell. It's all just so inert from the get-go that I really don't see any value in this poor man's attempt at late-stage Kurosawa. Maybe I'm being too hard on Kubi and it's facing the brunt of a long viewing day, but I've gotta be honest here, I'm struggling to find anything of value in this experience whatsoever. Kubi gets a 3 out of 10. Katell, Quillévéré, goddammit, okay. Along Came Love is a pretty well-made but very forgettable love tragedy. This one's about a single mother and her child trying to make a life for themselves with a new father figure in post-war France. The film is definitely well crafted, and you get a tangible sense of the rocky, seaside atmosphere in the lensing and the sound design, and the relationship at the film's center is earnest enough. There's just a lot that Quillévéré... God damn it. There's a lot that this director stuffs into the narrative that feels like it's worn out territory at this point, and there isn't enough added to the experience to make it feel fresh and worthwhile as a new take. Pretty harmless, but overlong as well, and unlike Cobweb, I just don't really see the overarching experience quite justifying this messy pacing. Not a film experience I regret, but if anything more interesting had been playing at the same time, I'd definitely be kicking myself right now. I'm giving Along Came Love a 6 out of 10. Up next is Pictures of Ghosts, directed by Kleber Mendonça Filho. This is a personal documentary about the movie theaters in Mendonça's native Recife, Brazil. And as far as these intimate, cinema paradiso-style stories go, this one was decent enough. There's some real heart and even some magic in the way the director frames the story and parallels the history of these theaters with how they influenced his own films, but the balance just doesn't feel quite perfected. Mendonça seems to want to split the difference between a scathing indictment of Brazil's political past and the rosier look at the story of his youth, and the film just doesn't get all the way there to be as effective as he wants. There are some truly touching moments in Pictures of Ghosts, and the final scene is really haunting and memorable. I'm still thinking about it. So I definitely recommend the film for anyone already on board with this sort of personal documentary filmmaking. I can already tell Brazilian Letterboxd is gonna eat this up like catnip, but for me, right now, I'm sticking with a 6.5 out of 10. The latest film from Anurag Kashyap, Kennedy, is the only Indian film to play in Cannes this year, which already made it an interesting prospect for me. Indian cinema is just so much its own breed that it always adds some much needed flavor to any stale film festival lineup. Unfortunately, Kennedy is one of the dullest, least compelling, and most inane experiences I've had at the movies all year. Kashyap's story is so undercooked and overstretched that this 2.5-hour riff on Drive just feels endless. There's no charisma from the actors, no flair in the filmmaking. It's all just a big ol' waste of everyone's time. As a midnight screening especially, you'd think a film like Kennedy would go all in on the entertainment value, but it's not even enjoyable in a cheesy way. The film is so backloaded in its character development, and Kashyap does so little in the beginning to make you care either about this character or the world he lives in that you don't get to enjoy this film as either a crime thriller or a character study. This is so surreal to be complaining about because Kashyap's most famous film, Gangs of Wasseypur, actually accomplishes all of this extremely well. It's a stylishly assembled crime epic with clear character motivations and a compelling through line. Clearly, the director is capable of handling such material, but Kennedy ultimately doesn't even feel like it's going for that level of effort or ambition, even on its more intimate post-COVID scale. Another pretty big disappointment, but hey, I met some really cool people at the screening and we had a lot of fun shitting on it afterwards, which is, after all, what the Cannes Film Festival is all about. Kennedy gets a 3 out of 10. My disappointment is immeasurable and my day is ruined. And just so we don't end on a sour note, let's discuss Victor Erice's Close Your Eyes. This is Erice's first film in over 30 years, and as someone who was very tepid on the slow-paced works over his career, Close Your Eyes was surprisingly engaging for the almost 3 hours it takes to complete its journey. There's just something so compelling about a film that fully embraces modern filmmaking techniques and technology, yet feels completely frozen in time, which actually plays really well into the subject matter of the film itself. As the story of a filmmaker who lost his leading actor and best friend mysteriously on set 30 years ago, there's obviously a meta quality to Erice in relation to his absence from filmmaking and maybe a lack of creative spark he's been craving this whole time, and Close Your Eyes just feels like the perfect meditation on that statement. Not much else to say because this is kind of a film you should experience on your own. It's a quiet and patient experience that will definitely keep me thinking for a long time to come. So I'm gonna give Close Your Eyes an 8.5 out of 10. So that does it for this installment of the 2023 Cannes Quest. Up next, I'll be covering the 5 films I saw in the Un Certain Regard section, so keep an eye out for that. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't, stay safe, and as always, I'll see you when I see ya.